when we say creative that converts, it's really about having that message and being in all of the places where your shoppers are and making sure that you're delivering, relevant content and relative creative that's going to get them engaged, right? It's about making sure that you have creative from top of funnel all the way down to the bottom of the funnel. And that's ultimately what is going to convert.
Welcome to Modern Automotive Marketing, the podcast where data meets strategy and dealerships turn insight into action. We're talking full funnel strategies, predictive insights, and real-world tactics that help dealers win in today's market. Here's your host, Jason Harris.
Hey, what's going on, Podcast Nation? It's Jason Harris here, and thank you for joining me on another episode of Modern Automotive Marketing, where I get to talk to, anybody and everybody I want to talk to when it comes to what is modern automotive marketing. And I got a good friend with me. I mean, funny enough, that's actually his last name. But I am super excited to get into today's topic, and you guys are going to want to make sure that you're ready to take some notes, because today we get to talk about creative that converts, why speed and relevance matters. Well, of course it does. And we're going to talk about it. But I got Justin Friend with me from Proficy Digital. Justin, what's up, man? How you doing?
Jason, good to see you, brother. How are you?
I'm doing good, man. I'm glad that we get to do a handful of these together. This is going to be so much fun. You had a good week? You ready to do this?
Great week. I'm excited as well. The topic of modern automotive marketing is obviously something that's near and dear, and you and I have had fun so far. So looking forward to getting into this one. I think it's going to be a fun one.
Well, it is going to be a fun one, right? I mean, we get to talk about like the actual funnest part of being a marketeer. All right, is the creative,
Yeah.
Heck, people got awards for the creative, and they still do stuff like that.
Sure.
I mean, when we think of like automotive fun creative, I think of stuff like in the 60s, the Volkswagen ads, the Volkswagen Beetle ads. I mean, God, those things were hilarious, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
They would take out monster billboards and Times Square, and it would be this tiny little thing up there, like a little speck, and it'd be like, small size, but big value, like things were fun, right? But I'm curious real quick, because I have a favorite, but I want to hear yours. What would you say your favorite automotive, creative, commercial message? What was one of your favorites?
So this is old school, and I'm dating myself based on the message and based on the delivery. I had a client, Jason, in Albany, New York.
Mhm.
It was a Saturn dealership.
Okay.
Okay, so that's definitely putting some date on the message. This was right when General Motors brought out 0% financing. He took out a full page ad in the local newspaper, and Jason, the entire ad, top to bottom, was a big zero, and then had very small, not microscopic fine print, but small print at the bottom with the details. And that
Yeah.
was the whole thing. It was just a giant zero. And from a newspaper ad perspective, he had really, really good traffic.
That is awesome.
It's creative.
It is. It's very, very creative. And look, this is fun. I mean, this is where I think, dealerships out there, their personalities, their passions can kind of come out. There was actually a commercial, and funny enough, this is actually the commercial that got me into the automotive space. I don't think I've actually ever shared this story before. There was a Nissan commercial. I'm going to say it was probably for maybe it was a 350. No, it would have been a 300 Z or Z for
Z.
my. I get that Canadian in me. Every once in a while it comes out, right?
It's all good.
But it was okay. I remember the ad because it was G.I. Joe, and I was kidding. So it was G.I. Joe, and I think it was a Super Bowl ad. The G.I. Joe jumps in this 300Z, and he's just like flying through the house, and it's just got this great classic music in the background. He whips like a 360, pulls right up to Barbie's dollhouse, and then whistles, and Barbie comes down, goes, "Oh my gosh," and she comes down her little elevator, jumps in, and they like drive off. And it was just like, I remember seeing this going, I want this car. Uh, so and Barbie. I mean, come on. I want like this is awesome, right? And B, I'm like, I want to go create this. I want to do that. Is there a
Right.
way I get to go do something fun and creative like that? And I just think people have this. I mean, people remember the Badger. People remember the
Yep.
Trunk Monkey. I think dealerships often underestimate the impact of slow, stale creative on campaign results. I think they do, right? I mean, they just if that creative is just stale, it does seriously impact the campaign results. And I'm sure you've seen examples of this as well. No?
Well, 100%. I mean, think about what you just said, right? The ad that you remember from your childhood that potentially got you into marketing. It was video, and that was however many years ago. So we know nowadays that video is critical, right? 70% give or take of shoppers want to be communicated via video. Think about all of the channels,
Mm,
right?
mm.
Most of them support video. So then the other piece is making sure that you have that emotional connection. You emotionally connected to GI Joe, to the sports car, potentially to Barbie, right? But you created that connection, and that's something that's really important. And oftentimes you mentioned stale creative, Jason. I think oftentimes people do the same thing over and over, and we can call it stale or whatever you want, but have a different tact. Bring in some humor, bring in some relevance, bring in, the type of creative that's going to take a shopper through their buyer journey from the top of the funnel all the way down to the bottom. So I think, yeah, unfortunately, we see stale creative all the time. And I don't know that dealers necessarily know how to get past it and how to get around it.
Well, I mean, the worst thing we can do is we can get stuck regurgitating what the manufacturer is putting out there, right? Like, for everybody out there watching and listening, look, the manufacturer is going to do what the manufacturer does. That's fine, right? But you're an individual. There's a personality in your dealership. There's a culture inside your dealership that if I don't know as a customer, I don't know. And this is the biggest opportunity. I mean, like, here's the thing I find. All right. Consumers buy into a story. We're consumers.
Mhm.
We all do this. We buy into the
Sure.
story of a product before we buy itself, right? So let the manufacturer tell the story of that product. I mean, you're never going to see a Jeep commercial without the Jeep blaring through a river and going up the side of a mountain, and just let the manufacturer do that. But there's a story around doing business with you, and things that you can do to connect to me personally as an audience, that's going to be way more powerful and way more relevant, and it's going to connect in a much bigger way. And honestly, you're just going to see much better results. Okay, let's get into this, because here's where I want to go to this. you know in a market where incentives change weekly, all right, inventory shifts daily, all right,
Yep.
speed and relevance are kind of the ultimate competitive edge. But in the creative world, it's kind of like speed and create they don't normally kind of exist in the same sentence,
Yeah.
because it doesn't always exist. You guys have come up with a great solution for this. And I think anybody out there watching and listening should look for some type of solution. So let's get a little bit into how you guys have kind of, solved this, because I think it's very unique.
Well, let's go there, but I want to go back 1 second, Jason, to something you said
Mhm.
about the manufacturer level creative, right? Like, the use the Jeep climbing up over the mountain, and yeah, that's that emotional connection. And it is super important that the dealership, differentiate themselves, but there's also the opportunity to leverage that creative that the OEM has, right? That tier one, look
That
and
story.
feel at
Yep.
a tier 3 level. And there's a lot of dealers who say, I don't want any of that. That's the OEM's job. And while it is, there's an opportunity to have a halo effect and
Mm.
have more light shine on your dealership if we're using those assets appropriately and pairing that with, to your point, the localized, personalized messaging to really humanize the dealership. That's the real solution, is targeting, shoppers using a combination of that tier one, tier three at a tier one look, but then also bringing it down to a personalized level.
You're
So
right. I no, you're right, and I thank you for bringing that up because I think before we get into speed and relevance, you're right. Personalization is huge here, right? I mean, Justin, we were talking a little bit about trucks. I think the last
Yep.
episode or before we started recording, the last one, and I mean, trucks are a funny one for me, right? Because when I started in the business in '99, all right, like it was very clear who bought a truck. Right? It was very obvious. The audience was very, very simple, right? I mean, that's not the case anymore. Me and my family, we just bought a brand new Silverado, and it's actually a family vehicle. That's why we bought
Sure.
it. So the space of it. So it's like, you know, the customer has changed a lot, and just having creative that talks to a singular audience is not necessarily going to work. We have to talk to multiple audiences. So before we get into speed and relevance, I want to talk a little bit about being audience specific
Sure.
with the creative and kind of thoughts and strategies you have on that.
Well, yeah, think about it. You have to know your shopper. You
Yes.
have to know the vehicle they're interested in. You have to know the things that are going to be important to them. Perfect example, and we can talk specifically about targeting on social media, right? We are partnered with Pinterest, and we have a fantastic relationship with the team at Pinterest. We know, statistically speaking, that there are more women on Pinterest than any of the other platforms. 80% of US moms are on Pinterest. Okay. So that gives us the ability to tailor messaging, tailor that creative, right? Which goes back to the whole topic we're talking about here, to a mom. If we then get to the point where we know that a female or a mom is looking for an SUV, then we can start to show creative, Jason, that highlights the features that may be more important to one shopper versus another, right? You were looking for a Silverado. You shared that it's a family vehicle, and that's fantastic. But if we saw signals that you, as a Silverado shopper, were searching towing capacity
Mm.
and, looking at trailers and all of those types of other stuff, wouldn't it be cool, Jason, if we targeted you and hit you with messaging that was relevant to your specific shopping, patterns and behavior? Wouldn't
Well,
that be effective?
absolutely. You know, for years people have always kind of been asking me like, what's the best market? And I love how this is like a very like general question. What's the best marketing strategy I can do at my dealership? I'm like, oh, geez, okay. It's a pretty loaded question, right?
Right.
Like, let me think of 27 that you can do. But let's say the number one marketing strategy that I have seen over the years that consistently works in all verticals is the one where the customer feels known, right? The message or the creative felt tailored to me as an individual,
Sure.
and that just it's funny because the marketing can now connect. There was that GI Joe and that Barbie commercial connected to me internally in my inner child because I love playing with my GI Joes and my Barbies. Yes,
Sure.
yes, yes. For everyone out there watching this, yes, I would take my sister's Barbies and I would use them with my we had battles. We had straight up Barbie and GI Joe battles. Anyways, it connected to me as an individual. Now, did they purposely go and make that creative just for me? Because no, no. But to your point, Justin, we can. The data's there, the trigger's there to tell us what someone is shopping for and what is important to them. And we can make that creative speak to them before we get into speed and relevance, right?
Yeah, 100%. And I think it ties in because this speed is one piece, but relevance is the other. And the relevance
Yes.
is what you're talking to about it tying in, right? If I'm a shopper and I'm looking for a pickup truck like you were with your family,
Mhm.
and I get served ads for, two-door sedans or convertibles or a minivan, all of those vehicles may be fun, but at the end of the day, if I need a pickup truck and that's what my intent is and that's what I'm showing, well, if you're not delivering me content about a pickup truck to educate me, bring me through, my journey, you kind of missed. And that's where, you're just causing unnecessary risk and being inefficient in your advertising.
Well, and then I started thinking about the speed of that because we're talking about a lot, right? I
Yep.
mean, let's just say, hey, you're a dealer out there watching and listening right now, and you sell trucks, right? And maybe you identified that there's like 5 potential core audiences that purchase trucks at your specific location, right? That's a lot of creative, right? And the funny thing is, not only just the creative talk to those audiences are going through different stages. Remember,
Right.
guys, they're going through different stages of their buying journey. We talked about this in the last episode, and I love that we brought it up. Look, over 90% of the journey happens before the dealership, before the customer even comes into
Even
the
knows.
dealership,
Right.
right? So, not only do we need to be, we need to talk and community, be relevant to that, but we also need to be relevant at what stage of the journey that they are
We're in.
shopping for. Like this,
Right.
it's a big look. It's a big responsibility, wouldn't you say?
Well, it's a huge responsibility, and that's where it gets into kind of like, we're talking about speed, but it's also feasibility. If
Yes.
a dealership has 300 cars in the ground, right?
Mhm.
Each one of those vehicles, has an individual MSRP, individual VIN number, all those types of things, but they're grouped, right? They're bucketed. So we don't need to create one specific ad for every single thing unless you're talking about a carousel ad, and that's fine. But the lift that you're talking about, Jason, is being able to effectively market for each model of the OEM that you represent.
Mhm.
So one of the things that becomes very interesting when you're talking about the speed is how can we take creative, which kind of where you started saying like speed and creative development or deployment don't always go hand in hand, right? I'm
Sure.
sure you've heard this. It's the 15th of the month and a dealership doesn't know if their ads with this month's incentive are out, right?
Oh, I've
They
never heard
don't
that one.
know.
That's a new one.
Yeah, new for you, right? Um, there's time, right? There's that need to have time. Well, part of what we've done at Proficy Digital, and it took a few years to build this tool, but we built a automated video tool
Mhm.
that literally has the ability to render up to 20,000 videos per day. So, go back to the dealership that we started with 300 cars. I just said we could render 20,000. So keep that 300 at the side. All the necessary formats. So square, vertical, and wide, right? So that fits all of the different parameters on each of the channels.
Yep.
And those videos can be created at every stage of the funnel. So awareness, consideration, intent, all the way down to urgency. And at the end of the day, we
Mhm.
can take and have a dealership's ads out in, I don't want to be overstating this, an hour, right?
That's amazing. I mean, I think back to my days, when I was responsible to creative. I was actually creating the creative itself, right? Yes, at one point in time, I spent time as a graphic designer and a videographer and stuff like that. I'm like, dude, that's at scale. That just didn't exist, and honestly, I don't think it exists for most dealerships out there. Anyways, look, guys,
Right.
here's the problem that we're trying to solve here, right? Static, generic ads will burn your budget. It
100%.
will. They'll burn your budget. They'll fail to connect with buyers who are expecting real-time personalized messages. So, like, you have to have a solution for this. And, sorry, anyways, let me get off my soapbox because I do want to dive deeper into this because I think for everybody out there watching, listening, guys, this is a game changer. And I know I like to use that word, but it is, right? To be able to put out creative at scale,
Yep.
all right, against multiple audiences, against multiple stages of their journey, and do it with accuracy and speed. Freaking huge. Sorry,
Yeah.
this is where I'm going with this. Anyways, just let's go more into it. Let's talk a little bit
Well,
more.
no, you're it, right? And it's accuracy and speed and scale. It's all of those things, right? In the tool, right? And we talked about, I gave you the example of a dealership that may not have their current offers in ads out by the 15th of the month, right? You're halfway through the month. So you've lost 50% of your month with either old ads or no ads.
Yeah.
We have all of the stacking logic built into our video tool. So
Mhm.
we get all of the incentives from the OEMs piped in. So let's say Ford releases a new incentive on the second of the month. We've had dealers, Jason, who have literally gained days, if not weeks, of selling time. And that's a huge competitive advantage because they have, again, we'll stick with Ford, but they have their Ford offers out to the local shoppers within hours of it being released, maybe a day, as opposed to, halfway through the month. So when you talk about like a competitive advantage relative to speed, that's it. And we do this for all of our dealers every single month. And that's where the scale thing comes into play. It's just what we do, right? It's not that at times creative bottleneck that can slow progress and success.
Well, and not only that, I mean, I think, for the folks out there, you guys are taking some notes, and I'm sure you guys are, and you will want to look more into this. 100% you should. But this also means you're never out of market. Look, guys,
Correct.
this happened to me all the time, right? There was a period where because our creative was so dependent on the incentives, all right, and when they change in inventory shifting, all right, that we our marketing and I see this still happen a lot. It's a stop and go, stop and go, stop and go.
Yep.
That's ended. We need to stop that. Wait till we can go to create the next one. See, look,
Yep.
when you're marketing to the entire journey, you're always in market. Okay.
Right.
Because it's not every part of that journey is going to have an incentive necessarily tied to it. So you can stay in market with your marketing and always be converting on a regular basis, right? Right, Justin?
Well, think about yeah, yes, you're 100% correct, right? Because some things are going to be time-based with an incentive,
Of
but if
course.
you start to think about awareness campaigns, branding campaigns, why buy type of information about your dealership, why should a shopper choose your store over someone else's? Having that information out there, in perpetuity or just always live, like having an always on strategy for that type of thing is critical. And then when you do get that incentive, you have the
Oh,
ability to shift quickly. The other thing, Jason, like we're talking very much like kind of sales oriented, but there's all of the other profit centers, the dealership, right? We've
of
got
course.
obviously new, there's pre-owned, there's certified pre-owned, service. With a lot of our clients, Jason, if they are either focused or potentially struggling with EVs, we'll take EV out and make that a separate campaign.
Mhm.
Everything from awareness down to, urgency with an offer. There's so much education that still needs to happen. Obviously, there's a lot of um, I'll be gentle and call it commotion in the industry right now with, credits that may or may not be going away or are going away. Like there's just a lot of moving pieces. So like if we
Yeah.
can help dealers effectively move EVs through, creative, that's obviously a huge plus.
It it is, and, you know, look, I think to ultimately execute on the strategy that we're talking about here, guys, you do need to find a partner to doing this. All right. This is just way too much load, way too much scale required, for you to be able to effectively do it on site. And guys, and I'm telling you, right? Like, I was a dealer that, like, for years I fought. I'm like, all my marketing is gonna be in house. Look, I employed, multiple graphic designers,
Yep.
multiple video people. Like, I put real money, real investment into it. You just can't do it like this anymore. And so I think it's important. But here, I would want to adjust a little bit because I want to get into what is creative or what is that creative that converts, right?
Sure.
And because I think for the longest time we're like, well, it's the $250 biweekly ad. That's what converts it. Well, that's what it converts because it's the last ad they clicked on.
That's it.
that, that doesn't. Let's talk a little bit because I think there's kind of some misconception around that. I'd love to kind of get your thoughts on it.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I think, we talked about a fair amount of this in our last episode, but it all ties together, right? If we're measuring last click attribution, yeah, it's that last one that has the $300 payment or whatever it may be.
Sure.
But our goal, Jason, is driving quality traffic that ultimately converts, and that's going to start with upper funnel awareness campaigns across all, the channels that are not going to be bottom of the funnel, that are not going to be a lead form. So like when we say quality creative that converts or creative that converts, it's really about having that message and being in all of the places where your shoppers are and
Yep.
making sure that you're delivering, relevant content and relative creative that's going to get them engaged, right? We can go back to Barbie. That got you engaged. Well, I guess GI Joe. That got you engaged. So it's about making sure that you have creative from top of funnel all the way down to the bottom of the funnel, and that's ultimately what is going to convert. I spoke to a great dealer friend of mine earlier today, And he just within the last 2 months joined Proficy Digital, and he was telling me that he just left a 20 group. And again, there's a little bit of a humble brag, but he just left a 20 group, and his, performance, so to speak, was fantastic. And people were asking him very specifically, hey, your traffic isn't up, period over period, but you're converting. And thankfully, like, and when the client and I talked, like, he's like, you guys did exactly what you said. You told me you were going to drive higher quality traffic that converts.
Yes.
So he's not playing the quantity game, right? Sorting through more challenging leads. He's got higher quality. And again, that goes from strategy when it goes across all of the channels, right, that we talked about in our last session. And now it's like, what do you deliver? It's this type of creative.
It's that quality that makes a difference, and I love the fact that you brought up the channels again, because I did want to talk a little bit about the big screen in the living room,
Sure.
right? Because I am so insanely excited about what's going on in the CTV space. I just am, right? And it's funny because I just recently experienced this, right? So I may or may not be in market for a new ATV.
Potentially.
I look, I had a Razor, a Polaris Razor for a while. It was just a two-seater. My kids were a little bit smaller, so it was fine. It was Now they're getting bigger and like, Dad, maybe we should, because these things are huge now. I mean, they're the size of cars. They're not small little things. You get four-seaters and you can get all kinds of stuff. So all right, I started looking a little bit, and I'm sitting around, I'm watching, I don't even remember what it was. My kids had something, I think it was on Pluto TV. They were watching an old movie I'd recommended to them, happened to be on TV. And sure enough, bam, here comes Polaris. And normally, okay, so I think most people would push back on the big screen because they're saying, well, people just stare at their phones when the ads are rolling. That is true when the ad's not relevant. All right. But when all of a sudden I saw the Polaris pop up and I saw the ATV go ripping through the forest and stuff, like
you were locked in.
I was locked in, man. I'm watching
Right.
this whole thing, and so I think it's exciting that modern automotive marketers that are out there. I know you guys are doing this, and maybe there's a little bit of secret sauce here, but can we talk just a little bit about that before we kind of move on to our next topic? Because I am so excited about the big screen coming back for dealers in a big way.
Well, yeah, and so I read, I don't know, I think it was Friday, an article that Mountain had published, and it said that OTT CTV had eclipsed broadcast and cable in May for the first time. So if you combine traditional broadcast and cable TV, CTV had more viewership. So like, what a cool stat, Jason, right? To your point that, don't ignore the big screen. Where I think the opportunity is, and again, we'll see if Polaris, followed this path, and if they didn't, make sure you call my contacts in the show notes. If you were watching that, right, and you saw the ad because they targeted you, they knew, and they saw, what your shopping behaviors were. If they then followed up with you, Jason, on Instagram because you were on Instagram, and we're scrolling, and if Polaris then followed up with you directly, or even better, a specific Polaris dealer followed up with you directly. And then later that afternoon, you're on YouTube, and boom, a YouTube ad for the Polaris that you're looking in. Like, that's where the whole OTT CTV thing can be incredibly powerful. You're looking at that at top of funnel. We talked a minute ago about conversions, right? You didn't go up to your TV. Well, I hope you didn't go up to your TV and try to click on it, right?
Oh.
That's not clickable. You're not going to get a hard conversion off of that. But if that, ad that you saw from Polaris while you're watching the movie on Pluto brought you to more relevant creative and more relative content on Instagram that then got you to YouTube, and then maybe you get to a dealership and then you convert, man, that's how it should be done. And that's how we look at that buyer journey, going from CTV, which again is just awareness, all the way down to the bottom of the funnel.
Well, and look, I mean, this is a strategy. And look, if everybody out there watching and listening, fundamentally, like, why does this matter to you, right? Look, fresh, relevant creative that consistently drives, a higher engagement. It's going to have better ad recall, and honestly, it has a lower cost of acquisition.
Yep.
It's just like, and what I mean by lowering that, because you're not targeting someone so low in the funnel, you're targeting them more in the awareness space, is it's going to simply cost you less as I come down and convert. And when I do convert, and to Justin's point, it is a higher quality,
That's it.
all right, conversion, a much higher quality conversion. And, I think, for the longest time, I think we've kind of, let's just say the industry has accepted, I don't want to call it mediocrity, but let's just maybe I'll come up with a better word for that. But
Well,
we've accepted kind of mediocre strategies and creative, and just, hey, these are the leads they're going to get, and these are the quality they're going to get, and we're just going to accept that. And I think if you're watching, listening right now, what you're hearing from me and Justin say, that you don't have to accept that. There is another way to do that, and and just you have some great real world examples of this. You shared one with me already on the Saturn dealers. Is there any others that maybe kind of stick out for you?
yeah, sure. I mean, again, like I think the biggest challenge, kind of summing up what you just said, is like if you are not able to capitalize on, well, I'll go back. If we're talking about incentives, right? And we're getting closer to the bottom of the funnel.
Sure.
Most incentives, it's, 30 days plus or minus, right? If you are
100%.
not able to capitalize on that speed to market, you're following, you're not leading. So the dealers who are able to get to market quickly gain 3, 4, 5, 7, 10 selling days are
Mhm.
going to have a competitive advantage versus their competitors who aren't doing that. When it comes to creative, that you asked for some examples. We've worked with dealerships who have said, gosh, we ran this ad in our service department to boost
Mm.
fixed ops. It was comedy themed, right? So a
Nice.
little bit not your standard. We've had more customers come in that we've never had in our CRM or DMS before, right? When the service advisor has to key in a new customer, like that's a good opportunity. The other big thing, again, and I mentioned it before, I can't tell you how many dealers, Jason, I've spoken to have said, gosh, the fact that you can reprice our entire inventory in video on all of these different channels that you're on in the same day is mind-boggling, because that is something that, to get ads done with our old agency would take 5, 10, 13 days.
Easily, right? If not longer. And,
Right.
not, guys, not only is the advantage there, i- like, here's kind of a final thought. I guess this is where I'm gonna go with the final thought actually on this one. All right. In the past, when we've talked about creative, all right, speed and relevance wasn't necessarily in the same sense or the
Right.
same kind of conversation, right? There was just always been, an understanding, all right, that if the creative needs to be relevant, then it's going to take time
Yep.
to create that. And we're telling you guys that that's not the case anymore. In fact, actually, if you're doing real modern, all right, automotive marketing, that's not the case. You're able at speed, all right, to put out things that are relevant and that are connecting with people. Like, if your creative isn't adapting as fast as your market changes, you're losing opportunities every single
Yep.
day, and I'm telling you guys, you need to find a partner that's gonna be able to help you out with this. So there are my final thoughts. Justin, I know we're getting towards the tail end of our conversation. Love to kinda get your final thoughts, and, maybe we'll tease up the next episode a little bit because 'cause I'm excited about this next episode as well. But go ahead, what are your final thoughts on this?
Yeah, final thoughts. I think you summed it up well. Like if you're not leading your following, if you're losing time based on stale creative or creative that's not relevant, and you're not getting out to the market when the market is ready to receive it, then again you're losing opportunity and leaving customers untouched. And in today's day and age, when it's not a super easy market out there, there are challenges. Be as the best that you possibly can, be as effective as you can, remove as much risk as you can, and I think you'll find more success.
Well, and the thing is, guys, we're telling you this is not just a good idea. Okay, I think anybody out there would agree this is a good idea. No, this is something you actually can do. Like,
Yep.
in something you need to do, right? Hey, I love the fact that you kind of brought up, if you're not first, you're last. No.
You
Well,
said it, not me.
I first, because in our next episode, all right, titled "Is Your Strategy Forward Looking, or Are You Looking Through the Rearview Mirror?" All right. We are definitely going to have some, if you're not first, you're last analogies in that episode. So I'm excited to get into it. Justin, I really appreciate, man, your time today. This has been a lot of fun for everybody out there watching and listening. If you guys have enjoyed this content and you love to see more content like this, one of the biggest ways you guys can support content like this, and also just a great way of, giving us a big compliment, is share the show. Okay. It
Please.
means so much to us as content creators when if you got a manager or an owner or a colleague or a friend that needs to see some portion of today's conversation, it means the world to us when you guys share the show. Justin, thank you so much for taking the time to jam with me today, man. This has been an absolute blast. We will see you guys next time. Thank you.
Thanks, Jason. See ya.
Thanks for tuning in to Modern Automotive Marketing, where modern marketing meets measurable results. From predictive insights to creative that actually converts, we're here to turn insight into action. Make sure to follow the show, share it with your team, and we'll see you in the next episode.